All right, so we'll get started. So thank you all for joining us this evening at the Research and Publications Office of IIM Ahmedabad. We are extremely delighted and honored to host Mr. VC Gopalratnam, who is the Global CIO at Philips, as our first speaker for the Practitioner Talk series. So let me give a bit of introduction of Gopal. I have known him for more than 2 decades now. And well, I have to tell that. So when I was a rookie in GE Analytics, Gopal was a business leader, and last 2 decades he had significant experience in globally as well. So he's currently a global CIO for Royal Philips, where he's responsible for the digital IT landscape of the future, enabling business growth, innovations in data and digital, operational excellence, and IT user experience. Under Gopal's leadership, the company has flourished, and he had played a very pivotal role in developing the connected technologies, systems, and processes that expands Philips' position as a leader in providing innovative health technology solutions that touch billions of lives each year. Of course, we have seen the value of it, particularly during the COVID times, where this was even played a larger role. So Gopal is a seasoned executive with 25 plus years of experience in leading and delivering transformational programs pivoted around digital technologies and analytics. He has vast experience in high-tech and conglomerate sectors such as in Americas and multiple other countries to direct ownership of business outcomes, talent development, and global delivery models. Through his 360-degree management style, Gopal has a proven track record of building an engaged and driven workforce focused on business transformation. So he has multiple roles. Prior to joining Philips, he had various executive level roles at Cisco and General Electric. At Cisco, he was the Senior Vice President of IT and CIO for International Operations, as well as the site leader for Cisco India. He was the head of global IT services, guiding the vision and strategy for key IT enablers across the organization in the areas of employee services and experience, global workforce planning and operations, vendor management, and regional IT operations. Prior to Cisco, Gopal was a business leader of global analytics practice at GE at Genpact now, and also led their global e-engineering, collaborative engineering practice at the Jack Welch Technology Center in Bangalore, India. He holds an MBA in MIS Finance and a master's degrees in chemical engineering and environmental engineering. So without much delay, I would give the floor to Gopal, who will talk to us about the digital initiatives at Philips that has transformed the companies and also brought growth. The idea of this talk, again, is to identify opportunities, both for practice and most importantly, researchers, and inspire researchers to take up more such problems for carrying out meaningful research. So over to you, Gopal. So thank you again for joining us this evening here and morning your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Devjit. Hope you can hear me clearly. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you. I think back 35, 36 years ago, when I had the opportunity to join the MBA program at IIM Ahmedabad. I'm probably the only person that I know who declined admission offers from IITs and IIMs for both my undergraduate technology degree as well as my MBA program. And I moved to the US. So I don't know if that was a good thing that I did, but there's no point second guessing that 35 years later. But obviously the people who are on this call should really consider themselves privileged to have the opportunity to actually further their education and their career with an institute like IIM Ahmedabad. So what I wanted to do today was really have an informal conversation. The slides are just meant to guide the conversation. So please feel free to stop me at any time if you have any specific questions. While the title of the presentation says Accelerating Digital Transformation of the Philips Supply Chain, I'm going to make it more generic and not just talk about supply chain, but really what is actually happening across the enterprise. The supply chain is pivotal to any organization, particularly an organization like Philips, which has its history in hardware and now is actually making the transition from being a hardware company to becoming a software and a solutions company. So this kind of journey is very common in the industry today. You see companies like GE and Siemens and Philips do this. You see companies like Cisco and IBM and others do this. The interesting thing is, although these companies all started out in the hardware space, almost every product of theirs has embedded software in it. And it's just that the companies never really thought it wise to monetize the software separately. And now with the world moving towards becoming more and more software centric, and investors and shareholders are obviously looking for recurring revenue and predictability of revenue, delivering everything as a service, delivering everything as an annuity business really makes a huge difference in how shareholders perceive the company. So if you can flip to the next slide, Debjit. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about Philips and our purpose, spend a little bit of time on what is going on in healthcare, and then, of course, the post-COVID era, what's in store for us, and then actually get into some specific examples. So if you can move on. Philips as a company has been around for 130 years. So it's one of the old companies that's obviously moved into the 21st century and wanting to becoming competitive with the modern companies. Philips is a household name. It's a household brand, very, very well known around the world. Philips, of course, started out in electronics, consumer electronics, in the lighting business, in the appliances business, and so on. The older people in the group today may remember that there was something called a cassette player. And the first cassette player and the first cassette, audio cassette, was invented by Philips. The first CD-ROM was invented by Philips, et cetera, et cetera. So you can go down that list. And I'm sure a lot of you are using appliances today that are manufactured by Preeti, for example, which used to be a Philips company. But I think in the last 5 years, what the company decided to do was we actually hived off most of those businesses, the consumer appliances, the lighting business, etc. And now today we focus exclusively on healthcare. So we call ourselves a health tech companies, which is why our purpose is really to try to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people a year by the year 2030. As things stand now, we've impacted about 1.7 billion. So we still have a long way to go. But healthcare has become front and center in the last 2.5 years. The world has been through some crazy things in the last 2.5 years, and things are not getting any easier. And if anything, today, there are probably more headwinds out there for companies because of the situation in the Ukraine, Russia, because of the situation in China, where a lot of world manufacturing actually happens. And places like Shanghai getting shut down for weeks on end is not helping. Now we have an inflationary economy. Obviously, prices are going up everywhere. The US is likely to go into recession, and COVID continues to raise its head everywhere. And now we have the new monkeypox threat as well. So with all of this happening, it's really important that companies really focus on how they continue to deliver compelling user experiences for its customers, and more importantly, deliver tangible business outcomes for top line enhancement, as well as improvement of the bottom line through productivity and efficiency. So if you go to the next slide, what is actually happening in the healthcare industry is this whole notion of improving what we call the quadruple aim. And what the quadruple aim is essentially means is you go across the continuum of healthcare, from healthy living to prevention to diagnosis to treatment and home care. We have to deliver improved patient experience. Patients want everything at their own convenience. They want things done efficiently. They don't really want to spend too much time, waiting for activities to happen. Everybody wants better health outcomes, which essentially means that things need to get diagnosed quickly, diagnosed correctly, in order for medical treatment to happen expeditiously. The hospitals and the healthcare providers are looking for improved staff experience. The people working in hospitals and healthcare institutes really need to have the ability to use the equipment effectively. We cannot afford downtimes. We cannot afford unplanned outages and so on. And ultimately, all of this needs to lead to a lower cost of healthcare. As all of you know, healthcare costs are going up through the roof, and clear expectation that the healthcare industry has is that we will actually lower the cost of healthcare. And in order to do all of this, we have to move towards outcome-oriented models. New business models are coming in, not just B2B, but B2C, but B2B2C as well. And that is something that Philips also as a company has started to embrace. So if you go to the next slide, please. So where are we after the pandemic, right? The aftermath of the pandemic has created a completely different definition of business as usual. You know, as the world continues to settle down and the pandemic seems to be tapering off a little bit, we are now used to new ways of working, right? From the hybrid working models to telehealth. Obviously, for all of you doing your degrees, some level of virtual networking, some level of virtual collaboration needs to happen for you to complete your educational program. But broadly, if you look at it, there are two areas where post-COVID, companies are being impacted. And the first one is in the area of transformation, and the second one is in the area of innovation. And both of them kind of go together. At Philips, we are already a market leader in terms of building connected and resilient supply chains and smart factories. And the pandemic has further reinforced the need for the same. On the innovation side, we are working closely with hospital staff to ensure remote care and support during the pandemic and its aftermath. We have retained the remote model and the infrastructure that's needed to increase the span of patient care and staff support. But the post-COVID world has us looking at solutions to deal with health conditions that are arising in people after recovering from COVID. I'll give you a simple example. Since the beginning of the pandemic, a Philips survey that we conducted showed that 60% of respondents had their sleep impacted negatively by COVID. And patients of sleep apnea have been worse impacted. And we furthered our care from anywhere approach that's allowing sleep therapists, physicians, and patients to actually work from anywhere, stay in contact, and actually improve the outcome of healthcare service to all of these patients. And also to contain the ever-increasing cost increase of healthcare, value-based care models are making a comeback in the post-COVID era. Providers are reimbursed based on the quality or value metrics as opposed to the quantity or volume of services delivered. And this value-based care ensures that patient-centric care delivers improved outcomes, thereby reducing the cost to the patients as well as reducing cost to the healthcare industry. These are some fundamental changes that we are making in the way we are operating, and what has that done to our supply chain from a digital transformation perspective. So if you go to the next slide, we are actually stepping up from the traditional supply chain challenges, which talk about a whole bunch of manual steps that people have to go through, a lot of times using Excel and technologies like that. As a result of all this, there is slow decision making. And if you think about what the world is expecting today, the customers are actually asking for decisions on time, decisions that are quick, and decisions that are decisive. And the traditional supply chains are not able to do that. And also because of this, we have an enormous number of people working in the supply chain, leading to a higher cost of service. Ultimately, all of this contribute to suboptimal process performance. So if there is one particular research area that you should really be focusing on, which the world will benefit from, is how do we actually get a handle on all of these four things at the same time? How do we provide end-to-end visibility? How do we provide end-to-end tracking? How do we provide real-time information to be delivered to the users in the right format, at the right time, on the right platform in order to make the right decision? Not an easy thing to do. And if you think about what companies are doing, there is this whole mechanism of a control tower paradigm, right? A control tower, if you remember, for an airport, is the nerve center of operations. This is where almost every operational parameter is tracked in real time in order to make the airport function. A similar concept is being put in place by most of the companies which have deep supply chains. And if there is anything that enables that, this whole notion of how all of these activities, the fulfillment of the customer request, the planning and the forecasting associated with this, making sure that customers are connected to the different parts of the supply chain in real time so that they can actually access their own information. How do we actually get into this whole notion of a digital product development, which borders on the whole concept of digital twins, which is also a very hot research area that supply chain and operational practitioners need to look at. How do you make sure that you can simulate a digital twin that mirrors the operations in a real world kind of a situation that can deliver tremendous value, not just to organizations like Philips, but to almost every industry out there. And closely tied to all of this is this notion of a smart factory. We've talked about the paradigms like Internet of Things. We've talked about the industrial Internet of Things, and how do information technology and operational technologies come together, IT and OT, working together at scale in a secure way, in a reliable way, in order to deliver efficiency and results in real time. To me, I think this is the foundation of where research is moving. And this is the foundation where academia needs to actually step up its engagement with the corporate world, because this kind of value is really unbelievable. I mean, almost every company talks about variable costs. Every company talks about transactional cost productivity. Any little difference that you can actually make there through your research work is going to go a very, very long way. I'll give you a simple example. Almost 15, 20 years ago, when Walmart was actually putting in its now world famous, supply chain, one of the things that happened there was Procter & Gamble obviously is in the business of making diapers, right? I think their brand is called Pampers, if I'm not mistaken. So what actually ended up happening was a lot of the Pampers or the diapers were actually sold out of Walmart. And Procter & Gamble went to Walmart and said, we need, greater notice period or head time or lead time in order to make sure that we can fulfill your orders. And Walmart made one very simple request. They basically told P&G, we are not going to give you the lead time. We will give you access to our backend systems. You will have real-time information on replenishment, on sales data, on volumes, etc., etc. You will also be able to see consumer behavior. It is your responsibility to make sure that the fulfillment happens. It is your responsibility to make sure that our shelves are stocked on time so that we never run out of diapers. That was just a very simple decision that actually changed the world of supply chain and actually made it more of a, not a push kind of a mechanism, but it became a pull kind of a mechanism. It forced suppliers to pull information from in real time from the back-end systems of large companies. And in order to do this proactively and actually not wait for the customer to basically say, now fulfill my order. That is actually very critical, that you really understand why push versus pull is such a transformation in the area of supply chain. If you go to the next slide, please. So fundamentally, if you look at supply chain digital transformation, it's all about bringing data, process, people, technology, customers, suppliers onto a single pane of glass, making sure that the data flows seamlessly from one system to another, making sure that the processes get automated, make sure that the people are trained the right way in order to handle all of this, to make sure that the technology is future-proofed and the technology can scale and the technology is secure. Ultimately, the bridge between customers and suppliers needs to be totally seamless. And what does this do to the supply chain? It makes it connected. It provides real-time visibility. It's optimized. It's automated. And therefore, it becomes smart. And therefore, what are the technologies that enable all of this? We already mentioned the Internet of Things and the Industrial Internet of Things. Devices obviously have IP addresses today. All of those are getting connected to the common IP network. And because everything is connected to the IP network, you can control anything from anywhere. All you need is access to the internet and a browser. Whether it's a smart city, whether it's a smart home, almost every service that is being offered in the whole smart paradigm is based on this whole notion of the IoT. When I worked at Cisco, we did a lot of work around, digitizing sports stadiums around the world, because almost everything in a sports stadium can be connected to an IP network. And just imagine this: when you can actually go into a stadium, at every seat, you have a video screen, and you can actually watch your own action replays of a play that you just watched in real time in the field. And through the video, the seat, you can actually schedule a video conference with your favorite player and do an interview with that person at the end of the day. You can sit in the seat on the ground and order your food with the restaurant that's out there in the stadium and have it delivered to your seat so that you don't miss a single ball or whatever of a cricket match, right? This is the kind of service that is actually being delivered in a connected stadium environment. The same kind of application is being now rolled out to smart cities, transportation, banking, healthcare, security, lighting, any kind of service that is being offered by the government is now on a smart city paradigm. And what enables that is a smart network and all devices having an IP address that can be controlled from a single operating center. The second technology that enables this, of course, is this whole notion of big data. I think big data as a term has lost its value because it's no longer called big data. It's really it's not just about the fact that the volume of data is huge. What really big data means today is that the data is complicated. Nothing more than that. There is structured data, there is unstructured data. Obviously, companies are struggling to figure out how do you actually make sense out of videos and pictures and graphics and so on. I'll give you a use case which is so difficult to do and which is actually a problem in almost every sphere of life. And that problem is called tailgating, right? When you actually enter a building, you swipe a badge and a person walks right behind you, and they sometimes don't swipe the badge because the door is open, they just follow you, right? And this is a serious security problem everywhere. However, there is no technology today that can actually do video analytics in such real time. What ends up happening is the video stream of two people entering is sent to a data center sitting somewhere else. And by the time it gets processed and the information comes back to the edge, the person's already walked through. And that kind of research work, even though it's going on, really has not, culminated in an implementable solution today. And if somebody can work on that kind of a solution for video analytics, real-time video analytics, it goes a very, very long way in reshaping the security landscape. So those are the kinds of problems that you actually see with big data. Of course, AI, ML, I don't need to talk about that. The whole world is talking about this. Artificial intelligence is on everybody's mind. What people have forgotten is that the natural intelligence levels in the world has decreased. So because the natural intelligence levels have decreased, everyone relies now on artificial intelligence. So that is something that the world has to solve. And hopefully institutes like IIMA can provide that solution to improve the natural intelligence in the world. But AI ML is here to stay. And obviously, there's good use of AI ML, and there's also the bad use of AI ML. The bad use, of course, is all the deep fakes and all the dark internet. All of that is based on the bad part of AI ML. But broadly speaking, in the next 15 to 20 years, not just in the area of healthcare, but in almost every industry vertical, AI ML capabilities are going to be huge differentiators because of the fact that the volume of data is so vast and the types of data that we are dealing with is so complicated. You really need superior AI ML algorithms which normal human beings will not be able to process. And ultimately, the platform that enables all of this is the cloud and the edge computing. Cloud, obviously, the world has embraced in a very big way. The public cloud with the hyperscale companies like the AWSs and the Googles and the Azures of the world, they are all the public clouds. Companies still use a significant amount of private clouds, and the world is also investing quite a bit on the whole notion of a hybrid cloud. The difficulty in cloud, of course, is how do you move data and data flows seamlessly and securely from one cloud to another. All the cloud providers today say that it's an easy process, that they can handle it, but that's the PowerPoint version. The real version is obviously it becomes extremely difficult. It's very difficult for CIOs to manage those types of processes. Edge computing is where you actually put all the action as close to the customer as possible. The classic example, of course, is your mobile device, where almost everything happens in the palm of your hand. And speed and scale and security are three dimensions that actually make all of these possible. While this slide says this all delivers integrated supply chain solutions, you can take the word supply chain out and replace it with finance, replace it with marketing, replace it with anything. All of the solutions that are applicable in the world today are enabled by these four things, IoT, AI/ML, big data, and cloud and edge computing. So if you go to the next slide. So one of the things I really wanted to touch on, and I know that a majority of the people probably on this call have a data science background, okay? If you really think about it, there are two types of data out there. One is what I call as data for defense, okay? Data for defense essentially means keeping you out of trouble, making sure whichever industry you're a part of, that you focus on those things which actually keep your company out of the newspaper headlines. It has to do with security breaches. It has to do with access and identity management, and it has to do with compliance with the law. So data for defense is all about making sure that you lock down everything within your company or within your space in order to ensure that the right people have access to the right things and that you really don't have a security incidents and therefore breach of data and confidentiality. And you can protect your intellectual property and also make sure that you are compliant with every regulation that is out there. That is the defensive part of data. The second part of it is what I call data for offense. And data for offense really has direct impact on your top line and your bottom line. It makes revenue growth possible. It improves your profitability. It improves your productivity, your efficiency, and your bottom line. And therefore, how do you use data effectively in order to impact both the top line and the bottom line? So that is where the differentiation happens. Data for defense is something that you're expected to do. Data for offense is a strategic competitive advantage. So anything that any one of you want to do to help organizations and enterprises and corporations is to focus on the data for offense part, because ultimately that's what shareholders care about, and that's what delivers your business results. And whether it's in the area of pricing, whether it's in the area of revenue recognition, whether it's in the area of marketing and identifying new customers, incremental revenues, whatever it might be, it's so important that you focus on the data for offense part. And if you look at supply chain here as an example, almost everything that's listed here, the 6 circles here, touch all kinds of data. And it's so important that we get these parameters correct, because ultimately these have direct impact on the financials of the company and also have direct impact on the customer experience. If you can fulfill a demand accurately, there are no errors in the order. The customer gets what he or she asked for. Demand accuracy goes a long way towards improving your NPS, your Net Promoter Score, which is your direct measure of customer satisfaction. It goes a long way in making sure that you actually recognize revenue when you have to. It goes a long way in making sure that you're profitable. When you look at something like inventory optimization, no company wants to carry inventory beyond what they need to. And making sure that inventory levels are optimized ensures that there are no stockouts, ensures that customers ask and get what they want when they want it, and you're not necessarily carrying a whole bunch of obsolete inventory on your books. Again, has direct impact on your balance sheet and your financials. And I can go on. And ultimately, this whole end-to-end prediction of lead time is the differentiator today. In our personal lives, when we order something out of an Amazon, we really don't care about how complicated the back end of Amazon is. All we really care about is, I placed an order for a mattress today. Amazon says it'll deliver it in 2 days. I expect to see it in 2 days. I don't need to see excuses. I don't need to worry about whether that is in stock or not. That is your problem, Amazon. But in 2 days, I need to have it. And I need to know in those 2 days where exactly this product is in the different parts of the supply chain. And that is what is so important. And that is why I keep talking about the fact that the algorithms and the research work and that all of you need to do is to really arm companies with that kind of capability, because that is what ultimately differentiates a Walmart from an Amazon or a Microsoft from an IBM, right? Is really how you execute on orders and how you actually come across to customers. And the only way customers are going to come back to you for repeat work or repeat business is if their experience is good. And experience is directly related to adoption. Experience is directly related to fulfillment. And if those experiences are suboptimal, you will not have repeat customers. The industry that suffers the most on this is the mobile telephony industry. Probably has the highest churn of customers. And why is that? Because somebody somewhere offers different services. They offer something more convenient. They offer something as a service. They offer something at a lower price, and they promise faster turnaround, etc., etc., etc. So I'm sure some of you work in that industry. It's not an easy industry to make money in, even if you're Mukesh Ambani. All right, next slide, please. This is what I really talked about here, about the data for defense and the data for offense. And as you go from the 12 o'clock position to the 6 o'clock position here, running the business is all about making sure that you're compliant with the law. Your workflows need to be optimal, and you need to be compliant with almost everything that happens. How do you actually shift into the data for offense to maximize revenue, NPS, and profit? Is you need to have the following capabilities. You need to have the ability to automate workflows. Hyper-automation is a trend that the industry is moving towards. Robotic process automation has been around for some time, but robotic process automation only automates a sub-task in an entire process, and it will never deliver the full value that a hyper-automation paradigm will. So if you are working in the RPA space as a researcher, try to move towards the hyper-automation domain, because that is going to be a huge differentiator for companies. The world wants to do more and more things with fewer and fewer people. And that is important. So hyper-automation is an area to focus on. Clearly, the ability to predict. And here there are 3 dimensions, right, of data that actually go into predictability. The first one is what I would call data accuracy. The second one is what I would call data completeness. And the third one is what I would call data integrity. Data accuracy is about making sure that the master data, which are the key attributes about anything, are accurate. The accuracy needs to happen at the source. Nobody downstream will be able to change the accuracy. For example, if it's a customer order, only the sales guy will know whether the customer's name is Devjit Roy or Devjit R or D Roy. Nobody else will know that, right? So unless the salesperson or the person at the source puts in the right information, data accuracy will always be a problem. Therefore, if you can do any work on figuring out how do we improve the data accuracy at the source, that is a differentiator. The second part of it is an administrative process, which can only happen within a company, is making sure that you put an army of people, that all the fields in every application, in every system are completed with the right data, with the right fields, with the right attributes. So that is a manual task, like I said. And there is really no way to automate a data completeness exercise. The third part is really data integrity, which is really how one data flows from one system to another without a human being touching it. And that is usually the responsibility of IT organizations who are responsible for seamless data flow. But data accuracy, which is the master data quality, is a topic that plagues companies around the world. No company has figured out how to solve this problem. A lot of research is going on to figure out how do you improve master data quality, because ultimately that is what improves your predictive capabilities and your predictive algorithms. So, like I said, continue to do research in that area because that is value added. The third part, of course, is really around process analysis. And here there are tools like process mining and other things which actually go into the transactional details of a process, identifying the different steps, looking at the cycle time, looking at the transactional cost productivity, looking at how much time is wasted waiting for things to happen, looking at how much time is wasted waiting for decisions to be made, etc. Again, ties in quite nicely with the whole automation framework, but companies are also spending a lot of time on the process analysis. And of course, root cause analysis is something that's obvious. Every time there is a problem, we need to actually do a root cause analysis, but the root cause analysis has to end with something that creates long-term benefits or a long-term fix. It cannot be just analysis for the sake of analysis. It needs to lead to actual implementation of a problem that actually improves the takeaway. If you go to the next slide, please. So fundamentally, if you look at it, and I just used a few examples here to highlight some of the things that are going on in Philips. We obviously have a large services business. The services business is a follow-up whenever we sell an X-ray machine or an MRI machine to a hospital. And obviously you need field service people to actually go in and maintain that equipment. And also when the equipment is down, to actually fix it. There we need to essentially provide information on the install base to the field service engineer. What is it that the customer has ordered from us? What version do they have? What software are they entitled to use? What is the information that is coming out of that system, which they need to address? Here, confidentiality and privacy become so important because it's about healthcare. At the same time, they need to go in and fix it in 10 minutes. Imagine an equipment in the ICU of a hospital goes down because the software is not loading. It's a life or death situation. Your time is so important, and that's why it's so important to get the right information and the data to the field service engineer on the device of their choice, which they have in their hand when they go to fix it. So a lot of work is being done there. And this is where I also talked about the fact that we need to make sense of images. X-ray machines and MRI machines produce thousands and thousands of images. And if there is a problem in data interpretation of visual images, that is something that the field service engineer also has to address. And therefore, they need high levels of training and high levels of technology solutions that need to be available. Digital transformation is a broad term. Almost every aspect of Philips, whether it's our ERP system, our CRM system, our marketing platforms, our websites, all of those are being transformed right now using the latest technology that are cloud-based and out there. I talked about the fact that we do process mining, the fact that we do automation. So we continue to look at our internal operational efficiency in order to improve not just the way we work, improve customer experience, patient experience, and our own employee experience. And on the infrastructure side, what we've invested in is this notion of data as a service, where we essentially bring all the data into a data lake. We don't want to prescribe what kind of BI tools you use to take the data out and dashboard it. We just want to provide curated data. That's all we take responsibility for. And you can use any BI tool of your choice to create your own dashboards and reporting. And ultimately, on the infrastructure side, it's the same thing. You can use any cloud that you want. We will provide you infrastructure that is modular, and you can deploy your applications and your systems on any of these platforms and consume it the way you want as an end user or employee. So there's transformation that's happening everywhere within the company. But like I said, there are incredible opportunities around data, around automation, around process excellence, AI, ML, the notion of IoT and smart services. So there are an incredible number of research opportunities for academia to actually work on. And obviously, we have a large presence in India, and we will be more than happy to collaborate with students from or professors from IIM Ahmedabad if you're interested in working in the healthcare domain. It's not that we are not interested in the other domains, but because we've hived off a lot of those businesses to focus exclusively on healthcare, a lot of these solutions are extensible across every industry vertical. Whether you're in banking or in transportation or in the airline industry or in healthcare or in anything, all these solutions are very, very modular and usable. So I will stop there, Devjit, and see if there are any specific questions or any clarifications that people have.
Sure. So again, the floor is open for questions. So please, if you have any questions, you can either type it or you can unmute and speak as well. So. If not, I can start the first question, Gopal, for you. There has been interesting use cases about field services and all, but I'm just talking about in terms of our research capabilities that we need to build. Are there any specific customer complaints that you see specifically? Because those are the sources of big research problems for business, right? Yeah. So can you shed some light on your customer complaints? And
yeah, sure. So for example, let's say for discussion purposes that the customer is a hospital, okay? And we've sold them equipment like an X-ray machine or an MRI machine or a cath lab or whatever it is, right? So the first complaint from the customer is, how do we actually eliminate, unplanned outages? Unplanned outages are the biggest source of revenue drain for any customer, right? Therefore, the world has to move towards predictive planned outages. So for example, if I can track how an X-ray machine has been used for the last 12 months, right? I can almost predict when we need to take it out of service in order to do maintenance on it. And if I can give the hospital advance notice that on September 1st of 2022, the X-ray machine is going to go down for a couple of days or whatever it is for preventative maintenance, they can plan their workflows, they can plan their staffing, because those are the biggest bottlenecks: availability of staff and the availability of time on the calendar. So we need to synchronize all of that. So that is a common complaint. Can you give us some predictive capabilities there? Second one is, I also need to know what is all the software that I have that I've bought from you. As all of us know, anytime we buy software, whether it's Microsoft Office 365 or whatever, we never use the software to its full potential. We only use 2 features out of 10, right? Right. What is the software that we bought from you? We've paid you millions of bucks for this. How do we use the software better? Please help us with that. That's a common complaint. Another complaint is there something you can do to automate the workflows in the hospital so that the waiting time for customers and patients is reduced? They can go from a blood test to the next part of the test, to the next test, to the next test seamlessly by optimizing, again, the workflows and the staff availability and the equipment availability. That is another common complaint that we hear. Of course, if your customer happens to be an insurance company, then they are looking for, can I get access to all the right information so that I can process the claim faster, right? So it's all around the experience more than anything else, because ultimately it's about the patient experience, the provider experience, the staff experience, and the insurance company experience.
Great, great. So thank you, Gopal. There are now a few questions, all needed with the icebreaker. So the first question is about maintaining a robust digital supply chain requires a buy-in from the employees too, as it significantly changes their way of working. What were some of the staff-related challenges that you faced in the past regarding this, and some of the challenges you envisage in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you want to digitize a process and when you want to digitize a supply chain, okay, there are people who are sitting on a tree. You are actually going to ask the same people who are sitting on the tree to cut the tree. That is the biggest problem today. Anytime you digitize a supply chain, people are going to lose their jobs, okay? Because you don't need as many people as you had before, because the information is going to be available. So change management issues are a big, big problem. The way to approach this also is to make sure that you talk to people proactively about their skill sets. Can they improve their skill sets in order to be more value added and focus more on the decision making, not on the process of actually automating things? So which is the contextual knowledge that actually sits in people's heads. You can provide the information to people, but they have to say, so what? What does that mean? That decision can only be made by human beings, right? So the challenge, therefore, to the question is, people are going to feel threatened, that their jobs are at risk. So you really need to get them to focus more on the decision-making part of digitizing a supply chain and not necessarily on the digitization process itself, right? And this is a problem that we will continue to face. The world will continue to face this. Unfortunately, people are not skilling themselves as quickly as they should. And if they don't skill themselves quickly, their jobs are at risk. And that's what each one of us needs to do. We need to really have the ability to future-proof ourselves. The only way you future-proof yourself is focusing on, am I needed by my company? Can the company function without me? If the answer to that question is, yeah, they can function without you, then your job is at risk. So you have to develop enough skills to make sure that you are very, very relevant to the future of your organization.
Yeah. Thank you, Gopal. There's another question by Apurva. His question is, what is Philips' vision when they say they want to focus on healthcare? What does the future of health look like? What is the data they need to look at? I think you answered that part in your talk as well, but.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's about that. The thing that I mentioned is the quadruple aim, right? The quadruple aim meaning we have to improve patient experience. That's top of mind. Number two, we've got to make sure that we deliver good quality healthcare, and we have improved experience for the people who are providing healthcare, which is people in the hospital and so on. We have to reduce the cost of healthcare, which is spiraling out of control. And ultimately, like I said, everything in healthcare is about a life and death situation. So we absolutely have to make sure that we protect patient safety and quality.
Sure, sure. There's a further question by Datta Ray. His question is, what impact technologies like 5G and LoRa will have on the IoT in the healthcare and supply chain area?
Yeah, again, that's an interesting question, because fundamentally, with every passing year, newer and newer technologies are going to come in. The question is, does your existing business and your existing supply chain have the ability to consume that technology and evolve. So for example, if you look at the evolution of India as a country, India almost bypassed the laptop generation, and we actually leapfrogged into the mobile generation. There are lots of countries around the world which never really invested in 3G technologies. They went straight to 4G, right? So these types of things are going to keep happening all the time. But does your base infrastructure have the ability to consume that? Right? For example, we talk about the use of AI/ML in the data space. But if your data is crap to begin with, you can talk all you want about AI/ML, you're not going to get a whole lot of value out of it, right? So what you put in is what you get out. It's the same thing here. So if your supply chain is modern and it's modular and it continues to evolve, and if your business is that way, technologies like 5G and LoRa will have a significant impact and will be a differentiator. But if you're not modern, doesn't matter.
That is nice. So Gopal, a question from Anupam. His question is that, thank you for insights on supply chain transformation. Maybe ask your thoughts for strategically scaling organization through data and technology. How do you scale the organization?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with data, it goes back to those three things that I mentioned here, which is data accuracy, data completeness, and data integrity. If you have that, then you can scale the business as much as you want, really. And most of the scaling is going to happen through data lakes. That's the future, right? Where you could have 5, 10 different data lakes in your company, but then you need to have data integrity across those data lakes so that you only, now we'll never get to a situation where you can design an n-normal database where everything is just in one place. That will never happen in real life, right? However, we need to make sure that we have minimal redundancies so that the data lakes can talk to one another and the data can flow seamlessly from one system to another. Technology, it's the same thing, right? You can use technology and say that I'm using this great technology. That doesn't mean anything. One of the problems that most technology providers struggle with is scalability. I worked at Cisco, which is obviously a technology company, for a long time, right? I always used to say that for most technology companies, technology works beautifully on PowerPoint slides, okay? The best architecture is on PowerPoint. When you actually implement the technology, that's when you find out that things do not scale. And for a company, especially a global company, you will have 100 offices in 100 countries with thousands of employees. Scalability is so important because performance depends on scalability. And this is where things like cloud and edge computing are so important. If I take Philips as an example, our headquarters is Netherlands, but an employee in China or in Australia needs to have the same performance in all of our applications that an employee in Netherlands would have. You cannot have latency. You cannot have something going back all the way to another data center in a different part of the world, because employees and customers will get fed up with it, right? So scalability, reliability, obviously accompanied with security, are so important for scaling organizations, particularly through technology. And this is where, for example, when you design your infrastructure, you have to modernize and make it not cloud ready, but you need to have cloud native infrastructure, which essentially means that you have to make it modular. So if you need to change something out, you take one module out, but the rest of the world doesn't even know that you're actually doing maintenance. The customers don't even know that an upgrade is happening because you're only upgrading one module behind the scenes. it's paradigms like that which are so important. So architecturally, you have to get scalability correct.
Thank you, Gopal. A question from Shikha is about, again, about sharing. Can you share how companies become part of the supply chain at Philips? Does location play criteria in deciding technology outsourcing? Are there differences in way technology outsourcing work is sourced from India compared to countries in Europe?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we are a global supply chain. We leverage all locations. For us, location is not the most important thing. What we look for in supply chain, particularly for partners, is supplier risk. We look at their financials. We look at their scale. Can they meet our requirements on a 24/7 by 365 basis? Is there a risk that they will go bankrupt? Is there a risk that they are subject to macroeconomic impacts? Like, for example, based on the Ukraine-Russia situation, almost everybody decided to ostracize Russia. If something like that happened, do we have a plan B? That is something that's very important. Resiliency in supply chain is so important for us. So the financial risks, the operational risks tied to resiliency are important. And then, of course, we also look at political ramifications. And that is something that we normally don't talk about publicly.
Sure. There's a question by Abhinav in terms of checking whether remote health monitoring devices or electronics from Philips is planning to get into the Indian market.
I think we already are. It's just that you have to think about the maturity of the hospital industry in India. Obviously, there are progressive healthcare providers like the Fortis Group and the Apollo Group and all of that. But whether as a country, we are open to sharing all our mobile health information with healthcare providers, where you're wearing a Fitbit and running. Are you okay to submit all your health parameters to a healthcare provider or an insurance company? I don't think our people have evolved to that state yet. And because of that, the hospitals have not evolved to that. Eventually, it will happen because India as a country embraces the latest and greatest in healthcare. The key thing is, what do we do with all that data? And almost every company today, every country today has a nationalist agenda. Will India have a nationalist agenda where we say data from India only has to sit in India, cannot be exported outside India? That will have implications on how we run our healthcare industry.
Yeah. There's a question from Raj. He talks about, what about sharing the data with customer? For example, giving access to software to customer who is using CPAP machines so that he can download his sleep data from the SD card of the machine and share it with doctor, or alternatively analyzing his sleep patterns, alerting him something's going wrong.
Yeah. See, the future of healthcare depends on one topic: data privacy. Okay. What is happening with countries around the world is governments are putting in regulation which says that you need to expressly get the consent of the patient or the customer before you share his or her data with anybody else. That is an extremely difficult thing. Imagine if you have 1 million patients, you have to get 1 million approvals, right? Now, the other thing that we've also done over the years is we monitor through our operating centers how different machines are performing in different parts of the world from central locations, which is like a BPO process. You may not be able to do that because a patient in China may object to his data or her data being viewed by somebody in the Netherlands, and the China government will clamp down on it. So the answer to your question is, it really is going to rest on regulations and data privacy laws around the world of what you can do and what you cannot do. However, if you have the consent of the patient, a lot of things are possible. It's the same thing, like are you open to sharing your credit card information with somebody, right? It's the same thing.
Right. Well, I think those were the questions, Gopal, so far. And I think we're also at time. So I think we should, this time to also thank you for this wonderful talk, engaging our audience here, and also talking about some of the important topics that is gripping the customers and also the healthcare providers these days, and what are the important areas for research. So I think that was fascinating, and hopefully some of the audience would pick up some of these concepts or also some of the focal areas and take it forward. So thank
Yeah,
you again, Gopal, for this wonderful evening with us and your early morning. And I hope sometime we'll also be able to host you in person sometime.
no problem. It was my pleasure doing it. Just remember one thing. There is a lot of work and there's a lot of interest that companies have on research, right? And how do you actually improve the way we operate as organizations? And improvement can happen in any sphere, in any domain, and it can happen in any of the technology areas we talked about. So continuously stretching your imagination on what the art of what is possible is something that, you know, the corporate world is always interested in, and especially with organizations like IIMA. So continue to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gopal. And thank you all of you for joining us this evening. Hope to see you again next time. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.